it's been left to the government, but did the plea highlight some legal points there on how this allegedly is an illegal move by the BJP to allow for a Prime Minister, head of government, to inaugurate the Parliament building? Could you highlight that for us? What exactly were the points that that the petitioner called as illegal of this move to inaugurate this Parliament building? Prime Minister Modi inaugurating this is illegal, is what the petitioner said. So how, in his view, was it illegal?
Well, there were three main things in this regard, Nabila, that the petitioner through his PIL had told the Supreme Court. Let's remember there was a PIL because obviously nobody's individual rights in any matter had been violated in this case, which is why it was filed in form of a PIL. But there were three main things said. First, it was said that the government has specifically excluded the president from the inauguration ceremony, that the president is not going to be present there, despite the fact that a message by the president is going to be read out. And they said that by excluding the president from the inauguration ceremony, the government is not only disrespecting the Indian constitution, but they are also disrespecting the office of the president. They also went ahead and said that the provisions of the Indian constitution are not being followed and the Indian constitution is being disrespected. But exactly as to what provision they say is not being followed through this, they were not able to elaborate before the Supreme Court, which is essentially why the Supreme Court did not find any justifiable grounds in even hearing this petition in a detailed manner. They had allowed very short arguments so that the advocate does not feel that he in fact has been prejudiced against in any way on the basis of his petition. So like everybody gets a fair hearing before the Supreme Court, he was given a short hearing, but because there were no established points of law that he could place before the court exactly in which manner the constitution is in fact being disrespected, the only point raised by the petitioner who was appearing in person before the Supreme Court was the fact that according to Article 78 and 79 of the Constitution, it is the President who should address the first session of the Parliament. But in this case, there is no session of the Parliament that is actually being conducted. It's a simple inauguration of the new building of the Parliament, and though unprecedented because it's happening after several years that a Parliament is getting a new building, but at the same time the session of the Parliament is not officially underway, which is why there is no applicability of either Article 78 or 79 in this entire case, which is why the Supreme Court has said that there is no reason for the court to interfere. At the same time, they've also not found any justifiable grounds to entertain the fact that there is any disrespect to the office of the president in this case, as was claimed by the petitioner in his PIL. They've clearly said that it is up to the government to decide how this needs to be conducted, and if the government has decided that the Prime Minister needs to inaugurate the new building, then that should be allowed to happen. That of course has not come out verbatim from the Supreme Court, but that is the implication of the order that has now been passed by the Supreme Court. Like I told you earlier, the petition has been dismissed as withdrawn because at the last minute when the advocate realized that the petition is going to get dismissed, he withdrew it before there could be an official order for dismissal. But at the same time, the statement from the Supreme Court is very clear that there will be no court intervention in this, especially on the 11th hour, because the inauguration is happening on the 28th of May itself, on Sunday. So at the 11th hour, there will be no intervention from the Supreme Court on this aspect, and the inauguration will continue as it's been planned already.
All right, so a big win here for the Modi government, undoubtedly, even as the opposition mounted pressure. There was enough surround sound around how this was allegedly an illegal move, and this was sidestepping the constitution by the BJP. Here, the Supreme Court itself, the top court now, paving the way for the BJP government and Prime Minister Modi himself to inaugurate that new swanky Parliament building on the 28th of May. Anisha Mathur is also joining us right outside the Supreme Court to give us more on that. Anisha, give us the names of the petitioners, those who filed the plea before the Supreme Court, accusing the BJP government of unconstitutional move by allowing the Prime Minister, the head of government, to inaugurate this Parliament building versus the head of state, Draupadi Murmu, the President, to be inaugurating this ideally.
Well, Nabila, this petition had been filed by a Tamil Nadu-based advocate who practices in the Supreme Court, C.R. Jayasuken, who had, in his petition, pointed out that under Article 79 and 87 of the Constitution of India, it is the President who calls the Parliament session. It is the President who addresses the first session of the Parliament each year. And his argument was that since the President is the head of the Parliament, it is the President of India who is constitutionally the head of the country. It is the President who should be inaugurating this particular session, this particular building. However, the Supreme Court had a very clear question to ask, that we agree with your argument that the President addresses the session, that the Parliament is prorogued or called by the president. But what does that have to do with inauguration? What does this have to do with this particular ceremony that you're objecting to at this stage? And that after that question, the court very clearly pointed out that we are not inclined to interfere in this particular matter, because what is happening here, the issue that is happening here is of inauguration of a building. It has nothing to do with the president's constitutional powers or the president's constitutional position. And the court very clearly said this is not something that the Supreme Court can go into. So very clearly this seems to be a win for the Government of India, as there was a lot of opposition voices talking about the same thing. This petition, of course, filed by a lawyer in the Supreme Court, pointing out the constitutional position of the president, but the Supreme Court taking the stand